And join us right now, insider for the Washington football team for ESPN.com. It's our pal, John Keim. Hey, John.
What up, fellas? How are you?
So, John, it's obvious
Hello.
to talk about Haskins' poor play at this point. I want to rewind and talk about Taylor Heinicke to kind of put things in perspective, because the offense was so much better with Heinicke than it was with Haskins. How much work had he had in a Washington uniform? He was their Corona quarterback, right? Their quarantine quarterback?
He was the quarantine guy. Yeah, I mean, he hasn't had much work. I mean, when we would watch practice, you'd see him. I think it was last week. You saw him get a couple, I knew he got a few snaps because they needed to get those guys ready because they knew Alex Smith wasn't going to be able to play, and so they knew that if Dwayne Haskins struggled and Steven Montez went in and he struggled, then you throw Heinicke in there. So he got a few reps, but that's really about it. It's not a lot.
So we knew he was higher.
The guy just got here. It's amazing.
Right. Because, I mean, to his credit, and I don't want to give him, I don't want to all of a sudden think he's going to be this great quarterback because, I saw maybe that he doesn't have the strongest arm, and I understand he was great in college, but there was a reason that he wasn't on a roster. But that being said, the guy was ready, and it looked like he knew how to go through his progressions quickly and make decisions quicker than Dwayne Haskins. And just looking at that comparison, I was like, well, Haskins never kind of figured it out. There are a lot of deficiencies from accuracy, but to me, the biggest deficiency with Dwayne Haskins was he just didn't process the field very quickly and didn't see the field very well.
Right, and I think that's one of the things that struck me. Now, again, when I've gotten through almost 3/4 of this game, and so I haven't gotten to the Heinicke section to see what kind of. And when you're watching it live, especially as a writer in the reporter in the fourth quarter, a lot of it is you're so focused on getting your story done too. Mm-hmm. So you're watching, but you're not processing the same way. And that's why I say I always like to go back and watch it. But in this case, what kind of coverages were they playing? How soft was it? Softer? Were they giving him certain stuff, or was it still the same thing? And but what I saw was a guy who looked more comfortable, and he's only been here for a month. Now, he's been in this offense before. He played in Carolina. He played in Minnesota with the Turners. So he has familiarity with the system, but he did look more comfortable. And you're right, he seemed to know where guys were supposed to be and when. And I think that was a troubling thing. And there were a couple plays with Haskins where the last play that he had was that 4th down and 2 where Cam Sims, he drops back, he's looking a little bit to the right, gets to the middle, but never gets to the left. And Cam Sims is just sitting there. Mm-hmm. It's an easy first down, and he doesn't get there. And, sometimes it's a matter of sticking with your guy longer. And I'll go back to Cam Sims. If you remember the play where everybody said, oh, Cam Sims was wide open, where he ended up rolling to his left and had to throw a deep ball that was a little bit underthrown. But on that play, his eyes seem to be in the right spot. He just doesn't stay with the play long enough. And that's been a knock on him too, because on that play, Cam Sims turns a corner inside out, and that's an I would say easy completion because it's 25 yards on the field, but it was highly available, and he was there. His eyes were there, and he took them off. So there's things like that always happen, and that was happening last week too sometimes. And the interception where the smart play after he had that similar situation last week against Seattle with his pick, where the guy's sinking so deep, the underneath is wide open. Take that. Take the profit. Don't get greedy. And on that one, he got greedy. And so those are things that have been happening, and it's unfortunate because it just is. But those are things that keep happening.
Hey, John, is the play you just mentioned there, was that when he forced the ball to Sims and Gibson was out in the flat, he's wide open, it's an easy pass. I mean, it might be like an 8 or 9 yard pass. I mean, every NFL quarterback makes that pass, and then Gibson has nothing but green for 10 or 15 yards. It's easy.
Yeah, that's the interception, and Gibson was in the flat. There's the linebacker when the linebacker sinks like that, you don't need to throw that ball. You've got the underneath guy. Just take that. It's a 1st down and 10. You don't have to. That's what I say. I think there was he just got greedy, but Gibson was there, and that's. I marked down that's would have been plus 10. It could have been more because
Right.
the angle and the way, to be honest, the way Gibson's been running, with the ball in the open field, or just at any point, like maybe he gets more because his vision has been so good as a running back. But that's what I mean. You take the profit. There's no, you watch guys like Manning and Brady and the patience that they show as quarterbacks to say, okay, you're going to give me this, I'll take it. Then you're going to come up. Now I'm going to go. That's how that operates, right? And so that's something that's just. It's been there a few times, and it resulted in a pick last week against Seattle and a pick this week against Carolina.
Talking to John Keim, covers the Washington football team for ESPN.com. John, why is Steven Sims still returning punts for this team? Hasn't he been shaky the entire time catching the ball?
I can't answer that question because it's a good question, and I think that has to be asked again. I think, it's funny because lost in the aftermath of, because of what happened yesterday with Haskins, like that was obviously the story. Mm-hmm. And that's one that needs to be explored more, and I don't have a good answer. So because I'm with you, like one of the problems that they had last year with him were the hands. Right. And everybody was like, why isn't he out there? Why isn't he out there? Because of his hands. And then he went out there, and his hands actually were better than you thought. Well, this has been popping up now, and it's been true on some of his on some of his from the passing game, and then also in this. So, wish I had a better answer for you.
Let's turn to some positive. We haven't talked any positive since 6 a.m. Chase Young continues to be a force. That's obvious. Montez Sweat had another big game. The defense has put them in position to win these games. That's what's frustrating to the fans, John.
Yes, it is. And now I will say, like the defense, the problem for the defense is they almost have to play perfect. So anytime they give up these big plays, they become killers. And they had a couple of big plays that they gave up in the first half. And they're not as good as in the first half, and they need to be better there. And I don't mean to be critical necessarily, but that's just the truth.
Yep.
But then after that, they shut them down. And I think like the first drive of the third quarter, you would like to have seen them gotten off the field earlier, but they did end up forcing a turnover. I mean, they only gave up 13 points, and I think that's why I say like they almost have to be perfect, and it's unfair because that is a strong unit. Listen, the defense gave up 13 points. Antonio Gibson was running the ball well, and they lost. Yeah, I mean, you would think that would be a good recipe for success, and it wasn't. And but yeah, I mean that's the building block for this team, and it also is why. When you look at that defense, you look at this division, and you say it's highly winnable for the next few years. I wonder how that's going to shape their off-season strategy because, I know like you could go in the draft and get a quarterback, but do you really want to wait like that, or do you go out and try and get a veteran because you have a defense that can absolutely win right now? Now there's things you got to add there. They certainly need to improve some defensive back depth at safety. Injuries have really hurt them there. Another linebacker, but by and large, that's going to be a really good group.
Joined by John Keim from ESPN.com. You can follow him on Twitter at John_Keim. You tweeted this 12 hours ago. Taylor Heinicke in the game. What a fall for Haskins. It's his third benching of the season. Do you see any scenario where Dwayne Haskins is active for the Philadelphia game? Or is he going to be the third quarterback? Is he going to be inactive for that game? What's your best guess?
I could see a third quarterback situation because I think it would depend on their faith or their confidence in Alex Smith's leg. Let's say Alex Smith plays, that they make him active. But I just think at this point you almost need to keep three active because just on the chance that leg gets bad in the game. And because you don't want to then have just like a Taylor Heinicke and then what? You're going to need to have a third quarterback. So I can see Haskins being active in that situation, but certainly not starting, and I'd have a hard time seeing him be the main backup. But it just feels like that's a wrap. So yeah, I think that would be hard to see anything other than a third quarterback.
By the way, I said this in the previous segment. It's probably insignificant, but I want to get the John Keim perspective. Early in the game, when you started to see Antonio Gibson going and then them gouging Carolina in the run game. They ran 3 or 4 times in a row. And then, to me, inexplicably, on first down, they're like, let's drop back Haskins. What is Scott Turner thinking there?
I don't know. We'll ask him on Wednesday because they had it going in the run game, especially with Gibson. And the big thing is, like with that defensive front, I felt like if you could get them moving laterally, you can hurt them. And on the ground, that's what they were doing. And Gibson's vision was great. He was running really well, and I mean, he didn't seem to have any issues planning. I thought that was it almost felt like that was as strong a game as he'd had, despite, having bigger yardage totals, but with only 10 carries and 61 yards, but it was just more the consistency of what he showed. And I think, I don't know, I guess I'm sure for a play caller, it's like run, you got him, now let's try and hit him. So that's, generically, that would be probably the thought process, but they had it going.
All right, so let's look ahead. If they beat the Eagles, they're in the playoffs. They're going to be playing in prime time. It's been a flex game. What is the likelihood that Terry McLaurin will be available?
I don't know that yet. I would guess that he'll play. That's a guess. He just, we didn't, I mean, that ankle's been bothering him for probably a month or so. And it certainly had to be really bad for him not to be out there. He clearly was, like last week, there were a couple practices he wasn't at because he was getting treatment. And usually when that's the case, it's like that's obviously you knew he probably, at that point, that it would be hard for him to play. So I don't know for this week. I know, I would, just knowing him, knowing the situation, I would guess that he would be out there. But I don't know if that ankle got worse or not, to the point where there is concern for this week. But again, we'll find out more. We talked to Ron Rivera today, but typically it's going to be on Wednesday before you find out a little bit more with that. And so, I don't know. I would think he'd be out there just knowing knowing him.
Sure.
And at least give it a go. But I mean, they certainly need him.
John, it seemed like game script more than anything forced Gibson to only have 10 carries in the game. I was surprised that he came back so quickly from the turf toe.
Me too.
Any reports, after the game, whether his foot was giving him any issues throughout, or he seems good to go against Philly?
Yeah, I'll just say I would think he's good to go because we didn't hear anything to the contrary. But he's a guy that, I mean, because they lost and because of the Haskins situation, to me, he kind of got lost in the shuffle. And it's funny because even on my podcast, I'm like, I forgot to talk about Antonio Gibson because like I said, just watching it this morning, I felt like he ran really well. And that's a good sign for them for Sunday because it didn't look like there were any issues at all. And like I said, his vision I felt like was really good and his patience was really good. So I think that's a good sign. So we'll find out more today about like where he's at or if there were any issues, but I didn't hear of anything. And it didn't see anything that suggested that there may be. But I was like, that's a hard injury to come back from. That's like one of the worst ones for a running back is that turf toe. And to come back in only a few weeks, to me, is kind of remarkable. But early on, even with that, like Ron Rivera was pretty optimistic that he would return at some point this season. And so there's obviously different strain or different levels of that turf toe injury. So they're kind of lucky if that was just one of the, like a grade 1 or whatever, because he could have been shut down for the year. And then you wonder next year going into, how does it affect him? Because they can be that bad at times. But he looked good.
All right, John, appreciate the time as always. That's John Keim, covers the Washington football team for ESPN.com. Have a good week. They're giving you lots of drama, that's for sure. It could have been a drama-free week. It could have been drama-free if, let's say, Haskins played okay and they won. Then they clinched the playoff berth, and it's a meaningless game coming up. But instead, typical form, it's a humongous week.
Yeah, and it would be no other way in Washington. No other way.
Correct.
All right.
Standard operating procedure.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, pal.
Hey, thanks, guys. Happy New Year.
Yep.
That's our pal John Keim, covers the Washington football team for ESPN.com.